Years fly like ibises, waging a war with one of the Mauryan satrapies. The mighty Bactrian kingdom makes its way to the Indian Ocean, and soon begins sea trade with the Kush kingdom. Arakamani realizes the powers at the disposal of Bactria, and in 256 he announced his entry into the war on the side of the Bactrians against the Mauryan Pakistani satrapy. Having heard about this, the Nabatian king calmly continues to lead the army on a military campaign far from his lands. The cover has worked. The Nabatians are unaware that Kush kingdom has already crossed the border and ready to attack. A season later, Arakamani storms Hurga city. The Nabatian militia is unable to offer any resistance. The same thing happens in the battle near the Harmoutha settlement, in which the enemy was defeated so quickly that the attackers don't even have time to use cavalry in battle. The 16-year-old son of the king, Prince Ankamani, is leading the assault on Petra city. His armor is crowned with the skin of the sacred Nile crocodile, personifying the protection of the Nile god, Sobek. Under of the prince's command, the army, like a wave, falls on the besieged and with losses takes the fortress. Soon the spies reported that perhaps the news of the loss of land, or the scorching sun of the desert, shattered the mind of the Nabatian king, and instead of leading an army to the lands of the kingdom of Kush, he began to ravage the lands that are under the rule of the Ptolemies. Meanwhile, the Kush kingdom is trying to suppress discontent in the newly acquired province. In 257, the Shah of Pakistani satrapy sends messengers asking for peace and asylum from the Bactrians, but the king Arakamani refuses. In 256 AD, Bactrians captured the last city of Pakistani satrapy from the Mauryan Empire. Maybe the rest of the empire's satrapies will take revenge. But now the Bactrians calmly dominate in the region. Bactrians' gratitude for our support in the war was the non-attack pact between all countries. In 254, the remnants of Nabatian armies after the death of their leader crumbled like sand and no longer pose a threat. Now Kush king began to develop a plan and build up his forces for a future war with Ptolemies. Was concluded marriage between Shanikshaketa, the adopted daughter of the king, and Anilmaya, the heir of one of the noble families, in order to increase the internal political influence of the royal dynasty. At the same time, Ankamani, according to the king's plan, began to gather an army in Arabia and Ethiopia. King Arakamani sees how weakened Ptolemy dynasty, and in the spring of 251, Kush kingdom enters into war. Arakamani leads an army to the Adumachu settlement. The tactics used in the battle helped to win almost without losses. The annexation of the town marked the control over all Arabian Peninsula. Arakamani refused to lead army in Syria. Instead, Jerusalem was the next target. In 250, King daughter, Princess the Zira II, took part in the Jerusalem assault. Zira was a skilled warrior, but this did not save her from the arrow. What carried Zira to the fields of Aru? The soldiers, enraged by the death of their leader, takes no prisoners. The death of his daughter shocked the king. Instead of marching on Alexandria, he began to reorganize the army, but this doesn't make a big change in plans. In the summer of 250, Ankamani began the rescue of Egypt. The first on the way of the prince was the city of Thebes, where the faithful by Ptolemy was quickly defeated, and the locals happily accepted the liberators. Weakened by the frequent wars with the Seleucids, the economy Ptolemaian was unable to recruit enough powers to oppose Kush kingdom. By the beginning of 249, the army of Ankamani reached the Myos Gormos settlement. The Ptolemaic servants fought fiercely to defend their possessions, but they fell under the onslaught of the Nubians. By the end of the year, the prince's army reached Memphis. Ankamani and his warriors cut through the enemy ranks, spewing enemies into the set lands. At that time, the king of Arakamani pursued and defeated the small armies of the Ptolemies, preventing them from gaining strength. The will of the god Sobek and his deceased grandfather
led Prince Ankamani to liberate the lands of the Nile.
In 248, the prince's army stormed Alexandria. The walls of the city were washed by the blood of the Greeks, Egyptians, and Nubians. The Ptolemaic warriors fought back with all their might, but when the walls fell, the defender's spirit was broken, and Ankamani marched through the capital of the defeated enemy. Nile lands were returned to their primordial owners. By this time, King Arakamani was already 55 years old. 35 years were spent on fulfilling the will of the deceased father, King Tinuataman. but the insidious Ptolemies will do all to return the lost lands. War will not end until falls the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The capture of Alexandria made it possible for the kingdom of Kush to conduct trade in the Mediterranean. In autumn of 248, the prince captures the city of Peritonius, which remained under the rule of the Ptolemies, and the Seleucid allies deprived Ptolemies of Syria.
The last refuge of the remnants of the Ptolemies dynasty is the Salamis city on the Cyprus island. The Kush kingdom army soon got there too.
In 247, the attack led by the king's second son, Prince Shabaka. Ballista shooting forced the defenders into battle, and the relief doesn't allow the enemy to strike with a united front. All this led to the final defeat of the Ptolemies. The enemy of the kingdom of Kush was completely destroyed. As a reward, the king gave his consent for Shabak to enter into the marriage what he desired. With Ptolemies were finished, and it would seem that the king's sigh of relief from the unexpected news should have been interrupted by a cough.
But news about the former ally of the Ptolemies, the Libyan Pentapolis, is pulling up troops to the borders, caused only a grin in King Arakamani's face.
Soon messengers already galloping at full speed to convey Prince Ankamani the order to lead the army to Cyrene city.
But future wars no longer seem so important. In less than half a century, from a small kingdom, has grown powerful states. What crushed enemies and returned the rightful Nile lands, and led country to this? The hero who colored by the blood, a lot of sands. Lion of the desert, King Arakamani.
If you like this video, please put like and subscribe to the channel. And if you can, consider the possibilities to support a video in this format through a Patreon or Boosty, then using the links in the description.